excited to introduce our guest speaker to you today. I became acquainted with our guest speaker when he was just a teenager, young man who drove sort of a nifty Jeep around our neighborhood. And I remember thinking, well, that's a nifty Jeep. And I was friends with his family. And there was a day when I was in town and my car died and I had groceries. So I was thinking of who could I call? And I called to see if Barry or Rhonda was at home, and they weren't, and Matt answered the phone. And I thought, oh, well, you know, whatever. The next thing I knew, there was a nifty little Jeep rounding the corner into the parking lot where I was stranded with groceries. I thought that was a awfully kind of neat thing, you know. I thought that was kind of a quiet guy and pretty cool, but here he came to save a neighborhood lady. So let's fast forward a day or a month or like a couple of decades maybe. Let's fast forward a little time from that teenager who just didn't hesitate to help someone to a fellow who is commander of a large, responsible oversight. And what a blessing it is to have him here today to speak with us. I'd like to introduce to you today Lieutenant Colonel John, but we know him as Matt Hart, so let's give him a warm welcome.
Let me just first start by saying she totally oversold that introduction, except for the quiet and cool part. Like, I can claim that if my kids will let me, but I don't think they will. How about one more round of applause for the band? That was... So it is truly an honor for me to be here today. I am honored to be here on a day in which we celebrate our nation's heroes, but a day in which I get to honor my father, Barry Noble Hart, as well, for his service in the United States Marine Corps, and a medal that is long overdue. Literally almost half a century ago, in 1970, an act that he did a heroic act, an honorable act, while serving with the United States Marine Corps in Vietnam. And to get to be here with him today, to be a part of this ceremony, it means a lot, and especially to get to do it in my hometown of Paris, Tennessee. So thank you for letting me be here. And it's somewhat fitting. It's also fitting that today is actually the 243rd birthday of the United States Marine Corps. So happy birthday. Now I happen to know there's a lot more Marines in the audience than that. I was anticipating a real loud hoorah. Jim, there, yeah, got it. Okay, good. So, you know, it's fitting that we're doing this today on a day in which they celebrate. I know he celebrates every year anyways. So again, thank you for letting us be here. I do want to thank you to Ms. Rhonda Staton and the Krider Performing Arts Center for allowing us to be a part of this ceremony today. And it's just a real honor to do that. But I especially want to say thank you to the men and women in our presence that have worn our nation's colors, either in peacetime or in war, because this day is really about you. So if you're a veteran, do you mind standing up for a second so we can say thank you? Again, this day is truly about you, and so thank you for being here, and thank you for standing like that and allowing us to thank you. It means a lot to see you all here, and I know Dad's proud as well. I know he sees a lot of friends and family. You know, it's also somewhat coincidental that as we celebrate Veterans Day this year, tomorrow is the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day. And Veterans Day actually finds its roots in Armistice Day, which the Armistice Day was in celebration of the armistice that ended World War I at the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. So here we are, almost 100 years later, celebrating Veterans Day together. Now, for a long time, we observed it as Armistice Day in our country to celebrate the ending of World War I, to celebrate the heroes that fought in that war, but also as sort of a rededication to peace, our country's rededication to peace. Fast forward to 1954, Dwight Eisenhower, when he was president, renamed it to Veterans Day, and that's why we celebrate it on 11 November every year now. And it's Veterans Day, a celebration of all of our nation's heroes that have fought in our wars and served our country. So a little bit of history there that's coincidental with the date. So this date is essentially to recognize the many brave souls who have answered their nation's call, even if it meant potential death or great sacrifice on their own behalf, for the sake of something that's greater than themselves. That is why you'll hear me today refer to them as our nation's heroes. And it's this idea of being a hero that I wanted to kind of talk about for a second. And I want to challenge your idea of what it means to be a hero. I want to share a story about a real life hero that I've known my whole life. But before I do that, I want to just park on this idea of what it means to be a hero for a second. Now, if you were to go out and Google the term hero and look at the images that appear, what you'll find is that most of those images show someone wearing a cape or a mask or some other mark of a superhero. You're likely to see pictures of the Avengers or Superman. I even saw one of Johnny Rambo. You guys remember Rambo? Yeah. That one got lost in the mix, I think. But this glamorized idea that a superhero is someone, or a hero, someone who superhumanly battles the forces of evil single-handedly, in my mind, it reduces and really takes away from our appreciation of real heroes, many of whom walk amongst us every single day. You know, there's a good book that states, there is no greater love than this, that a man would lay down his life for another. Okay? If you look up the Oxford Dictionary definition of a hero, it says a person who is admired for their courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. Noble qualities. I submit that our nation's heroes don't typically wear capes, but they wear ordinary clothes. They have ordinary names, they work ordinary jobs, they probably drive ordinary cars, and most of them have ordinary, some of them have extraordinary scars that they wear, seen and unseen, for their entire life. Some have paid the ultimate price, some have not. Some have families, some do not. Some look like brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, and mothers and fathers. But they do it willingly, knowingly, sacrificing of their own free will. And what they do for me and you, and what they do for our country is extraordinary. Yet very few of them would ever see themselves as a hero. And that is the true mark of heroism, is selflessness. Real heroes value others more than they value themselves. They sacrifice much by way of deployments or long periods away from their family, missing birthdays, anniversaries, first steps, graduations, sometimes passing up lucrative careers in control of their fate and control of their time. They do this while bearing arms on the front lines in defense of our nation, but in defense of our values and our interests as well. Indeed, their list of sacrifices could go on and on. Many of you in this room have made those sacrifices. But they sacrifice because they believe in our country, and because they also believe in our nation's people, and our nation's values. They lay down their lives, sometimes to the point of death, so that others may live. Is there truly any greater love than this? It doesn't matter if they're an airman, a sailor, a soldier, a coastie, or even a Marine. What matters is that they have answered their nation's call. They stand in place so that someone else doesn't have to. So that you and I can enjoy the freedoms that we take for granted every single day. So that others may live, and that our nation and its values can endure. And that is why we pause to honor them, our nation's heroes, to say thank you. To say thank you for your patriotism, thank you for your love of country, your willingness to serve, and your willingness to sacrifice for the common good. Thank you for your courage and noble qualities. Thank you for your sacrifices and for paying a cost that many of us will never know. If you don't mind, do you mind please standing one more time so we can say thank you? If you're a veteran, please. challenge for you today before you leave is to find one of them and shake their hand and ask them to tell you their story. It doesn't matter how big or how small that story is, I guarantee you, you will be inspired if you listen long enough and if you listen with open ears. So thank you again. This day truly is about you. And now while we don't have time to invite every single one of you to the stage to hear your story, there is one very special veteran in our midst today whose story we do get to hear a little bit of and actually be a small part of as well. And that veteran is my father, very noble heart. You know, as a kid growing up, you always know that your dad is a hero. You just don't always have the evidence to prove it. That's right. Well, today we do have evidence, and I'm going to show it to you here shortly. But I can state publicly that my father is a hero, not just to me, but to our nation. Not only did he answer his nation's call by serving a tour and 4 campaigns in Vietnam from 1969 to 1970. But today, over 48 years later, and on behalf of the President and the Secretary of the Navy, I get the honor of presenting him a Bronze Star Medal with Valor for a heroic act performed on 23 April 1970. This act upheld the highest traditions of the United States Marine Corps and could very well have cost him his own life. The citation, which you will hear momentarily, describes an act of heroism when early in the morning on 23 April 1970, an unknown intruder entered the sleeping quarters where Dad and several of his Marine buddies were sleeping. Dad woke up, confronted the intruder, who dropped his satchel and ran. Pops, in that moment, made the choice to jump on the satchel, which later was confirmed to contain explosives, in order to shield his fellow Marines from the blast. Fortunately, the explosives did not detonate. So Dad got up and gave chase to the intruder on foot. Now, if you could ask him, just like you ask any other Marine, I'm sure he'll tell you that what he was doing was just part of his training and what he was trained to do. After all, he is a Marine. But to me, acts of heroism reveal something much deeper than training. The essence of heroism is proven in small, often chaotic moments of choice. It is in these small and fleeting moments when we have no time to count the cost of our actions that true character is revealed. It is here that we prove we truly value others more than we value self. And that is exactly what my father did in those early morning hours back in 1970 when Sergeant Hart was faced with a choice to save his own life or the life of the several other Marines. The choice to lay down his life for his friends and brothers in arms. A choice for self or a choice for others. In this act, his actions displayed selflessness, proven through his actions, courage and noble qualities, placing his own life at great risk for the sake of his brothers in arms. All the marks of a true hero. Because of this act of bravery, the Secretary of the Navy, even 48 years later, has awarded him the Bronze Star with Valor, proving that the Marines never forget their own, for sure, and our country never forgets their own. And I believe that, for sure, is worthy of a round of applause. Now, you may find yourself wondering why 48 years later, why did it take so long? The truth is, it's 48 years overdue. After reconnecting with several other Marine buddies from his Vietnam days on Facebook and places, one of Dad's commanding officers, Captain Don Greenlaw, inquired on whether Dad had received the recognition he was submitted for. After finding out he hadn't, Captain Greenlaw set out to right that wrong, tracking down his old company commander and completing all of the paperwork to resubmit to the Department of the Navy for consideration. The Navy launched an inquiry which led to the Secretary of the Navy approving the medal just a few short months ago, and that office mailed it to me for presentation since it must be presented by a commissioned officer. So in just a few moments, we're going to get to honor Dad's heroism and correct this oversight 48 years in the making. But before we do that, I want to explain a little bit about the ceremony and the significance of what's going to take place on the stage here in a couple minutes. First, the medal itself, a Bronze Star, is a decoration awarded to members of the United States Armed Forces for either heroic achievement, heroic service, meritorious achievement, or meritorious service in a combat zone. The accompanying V device for valor distinguishes the award as being presented for heroism or valor in combat. The award ceremony is a time-honored military tradition in order to ensure public recognition of the decoration presentation. Now, it's tradition that all persons present will stand at the reading of the award citation when the presiding officer makes the announcement to publish the orders. Military members typically stand at the position of attention, and all others will simply stand, and we'll cue you to do this in a few moments. At that point, the citation will be read aloud, and upon completion of the reading, the member will be pinned with their award. This is to ensure that there's a public recognition of the award that's being given to the member. The honoree is typically invited to make a few remarks, and then the ceremony is complete. So at this time, I would like to invite Dad and the members that will be participating in the ceremony to start making their way to the stage. And I'm going to point out that you'll notice a few other men will be joining him on stage today, standing off to his side. These are people and men who have heavily influenced his service as a Marine. You'll see Dad's older brother, Gene Hart, who also served in the Marines in Vietnam. You'll see Mr. Larry McCartney, a retired Master Gunny Sergeant who helped in the process of getting this decoration. Mr. Rex McBee, one of Dad's Marine buddies, served with him in Vietnam, and then Mr. Jim Schnitzius, Dad's old drill instructor, who, if you stick around long enough, may get to hear him yell a few Jodies or something after the ceremony. So I have to say thank you, gentlemen, for making the trip in. We had someone drove in from Florida, we had someone drive in from Carolinas, is that correct? And then Lexington as well, so thank you for making the trip in, greatly appreciate that. And Alabama, awesome, so thank you very much. One very special member would have been here today, Captain Don Greenlaw, the gentleman who kind of got this process restarted after 48 years, but unfortunately he passed away this past September. But I know he's here in spirit as he saw, he made this an achievement of his toward the end there to make sure this got corrected after even 48 years. So without further ado, let's proceed with the presentation. Honor my father, formally recognize one of our nation's heroes in this special Veterans Day occasion. Thank you for your time, and thank you very, very much for allowing me to